Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a good night. I am King Pigley. This is Gaming Imperfectly, and welcome back to the channel, guys. And if you're new to the channel, I am King Pigley, and I hope you like what you see. Guys, we're in for a great story today. We are going to talk about a place called the Blue Hole. Now, if you don't know anything about it, this is an absolute true story and horrific. And if you are a bit put off by claustrophobia or tight spaces, probably not the video for you. Alright guys, so back in 1976, two Oklahoma recreational divers, which makes no sense to me because Oklahoma is landlocked, but I'm sure there are people there that love to dive. I don't know. Anyway, they went ahead and went out to New Mexico to a great recreational diving spot called the Blue Hole. Now the Blue Hole is a sinkhole that filled up with water. It's got rich history. It's a beautiful place. The water is crystal clear. And it's even said that Billy the Kid used to take some respite there, some rest, when during his time where he was running around riding horses, he would go and relax there at the Blue Hole. Now, the thing about the Blue Hole is that if you swim down about 80 feet, you come to an opening that almost looks like the drain at the bottom of your bathtub. It's big enough for you to squeeze through, even with you have diving gear on, your tanks and everything. It's big enough for you to squeeze through and then opens up into larger caverns. But most of those caverns down there have been unexplored. Nobody goes down in there because it's actually very dangerous, And, cave spelunking, like with John Jones, has a story. If you guys haven't listened or haven't seen the video I did on John Jones, go check out that video because it certainly outlines the dangers of spelunking. But this is a step up. This is a step in the danger area because not only is this going underneath the ground, but now you're underwater going into caves. So underwater spelunking. And this place is notoriously dangerous because the caves themselves are vastly unexplored. And so most people don't go down there. But these guys in 76, these two guys decided to go down there, and they did. And unfortunately, they drowned. And one of the bodies was retrieved from the police almost immediately, but it took a little bit to get to the other body. But once they got the other body out, they told the owners of the property, unless you're going to have professionals come and explore this cave and map these cave networks, it's really super dangerous and you shouldn't let people go down there. So instead of going and getting somebody to explore the cave in 76, the owners of the property had the Army Corps of Engineers actually come in and they bolted this huge metal grate down on top of the hole, and then they actually put boulders on top of the metal grate. That way nobody could get down inside of the drain, so to speak, at the Blue Hole. Now, let's fast forward to 2016. Now, guys, that's not that long ago. It's 4 years ago. The ADM Exploration Foundation, which is a group of underwater divers who do this exact thing. They go and they dive in the ocean, they dive in cave networks, they explore, they find old shipwrecks, they do all kinds of stuff like this. Well, they actually went to the owners of the Blue Hole and said, hey, we would love to map the cave networks for you. We'll do this, And the guys were like, okay, cool, you guys are professionals, you guys know what you're doing. So they took the grate off, they removed all the rubble and the boulders and stuff, and then they set up dive teams to go down and explore these kind of things. And they were very professional about it. Again, a lot of these people have vast amounts of experience exploring underwater caves. So, on this particular day, a guy named Shane Thompson and Mike Young were scheduled to go diving. Now, Mike Young was going to be the first person to go down into the hole while Shane Thompson stayed up top. But as Mike was swimming down towards the drain, he noticed that Shane Thompson was following him. Nobody to this day knows why Shane followed him when he was supposed to be the safety man up on the up top. But he did. And so when they went down below, they squeezed through that narrow passage into the vast network of caves down there, Shane was with Mike. And so as they're exploring these cave networks, these tight enclosed spaces that the Blue Hole is, and they're looking around, and they have a high-powered light. Silt's being kicked up because, remember, you're underground in a cave, and most of the time it's unexplored. So sediment, dirt, settles, And then when people come through and start kicking their flippers and, making a lot of motion, a lot of that silt gets kicked up. And so it's cloudy, it's becoming more difficult to see. But again, they have lights. And you have to anyway, because now that they've passed through the drain and they've gone into these cave networks that are down there, it's pitch black. I mean, there's no light. There's some light. I mean, 80 feet. In the main area of the blue hole, if you swim down 80 feet, of course you still have sunlight that can penetrate the water. But once you pass through the drain and you get into those caves, it's pitch black. So they have high-powered flashlights, and the silt's being kicked up. But when that happens, it's kind of like putting on your high beams in fog. It does you almost zero good. In fact, it just makes it worse, But they're looking around, and not too much silt's been kicked up at this point in time. And all of a sudden, Shane shines his light down. Shane Thompson shines his light down this passage. And Mike sees him and is like, oh, okay. They're kind of like, hey, let's go this kind of thing. Now, Shane Thompson and Mike Young both had tremendous amount of experience doing this. Shane Thompson had over 20 years of dive experience, and most of his dive experience was doing underwater caves. He was also a diving instructor for the Navy at one point in time. And in San Diego, he was the advanced diving instructor, which means most likely he trained Navy SEALs at some point in time. I mean, this guy knew what he was doing as far as underwater exploration, especially cave diving under the water. But him and Mike saw, looked down this passage, and Shane shining his light down there, and it looked like, as you followed this tunnel down, that it opened up into a bigger passage at the very end of it. So Shane took off down this passage, kicking away and swimming, and Mike was right behind him, following down this passage. But what they couldn't tell as they looked down this passageway, this tunnel that led to this other thing, is that it actually narrowed down to a point. And kind of like the same John Jones scenario, as they were swimming down this passageway, it got tighter and tighter and tighter, and suddenly Shane got stuck. And when he did, Mike, who was right behind him, swam into him, and he got stuck up against the wall. So now you have these two guys who are pinned in this very tight corridor underneath the water in this pitch black cave. And Mike kept his head really cool. He did exactly what you should do in these scenarios, which is don't panic and just back up. So he started pushing himself off the walls and pushing himself backwards instead of trying to freak out. Shane, on the other hand, even with his vast amount of experience, just freaked out. And he's just started, according to Mike, kicking furiously, which is just throwing tons of silt up in the air now. Which made their flashlights zero worth anything. Now you can absolutely not see. But Shane just kicked, and basically with sheer panic and adrenaline, he managed to force his way down this narrowing passageway and into that chamber at the end of the passage. He made it through. Mike, on the other hand, like I said, had backed out into the main area to where they had come in. And he's shining his light down this tunnel, and he keeps waiting for Shane to come back down towards him, but Shane doesn't come. And so Mike knows that he can't leave Shane down here, so he swims back down this funneling passageway that he had already been stuck in once to go try to help his buddy Shane. And he gets down to where it narrows, and he's getting stuck again. And staying very calm, he managed to wiggle and wriggle his way into that little opening into this cavern that did actually open up into a bigger passage. Once he got into that bigger passage, there was no sign of Shane Thompson. And he's looking around, he's shining his light, he's looking, and he can't see anything except for multiple openings into different passages. And so Mike's just kind of at a loss as to which direction Shane Thompson went, but he knew that he had to try to find him. And he looked at his air. Now, they're using what's called Rebreathers, which is basically scuba gear, guys, that allows you to recirculate your air that you're breathing through a device that filters, that scrub it clean, and allow you to rebreathe your own carbon dioxide because it turns it back into breathable oxygen. And it allows people to stay under the water longer safely without having to worry about your tanks running on empty constantly or short dives. So it allows you to prolong your dives underwater. And that's the gear that Mike and Shane were using. So he wasn't overly concerned that he was going to, Mike Young wasn't overly concerned that he was going to run out of oxygen. But he's shining his light around, and then he chooses one passage. And remember, there's multiple exits to this cavern that he's managed to force his way into. He knows that Shane came in here. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Why didn't Shane just turn around and head back? Well, here's the thing, guys. It's really confusing. You know, if you're underwater and all this silt's getting kicked up and you force your way through and you're panicking and everything else, it's really easy for your mind to play tricks on you, even if you are vastly experienced like Shane Thompson was. And so most likely what happened is that when Shane panicked and forced his way into this opening down the way, he somehow in his mind thought that he had come back into the main chamber and that Mike had actually squeezed all the way down the narrow passage. Now, again, I understand how, you couldn't even turn around. This passage was so narrow that these guys had gotten stuck in. There's no way to turn around. But in Shane's mind, Mike had actually gone forward, and he most likely thought that he had turned around. And Mike kind of deduced that. Now that he's standing there in this thing and he's looking around at all these passages, he picks the biggest one above him, and he starts swimming up it, trying to find Shane. Mike, after what must have seemed like forever, winding his way through sometimes very tight passages himself, he kept going down these tunnels looking for his buddy Shane. And unfortunately, when he finally came around a bend, it was a dead end. But at the dead end was Shane Thompson. His regulator had come out of his mouth. He was deceased. They don't know why. They don't know that if he got to the end of this passage and he flipped out. They don't know if he lost consciousness. They don't know if something happened to knock his regulator out. But however it happened, he did drown. But because they were low on oxygen at the time, even using the rebreather, Mike realized that he was not going to be able to rescue Shane at that moment, so he had to swim back down through all this passage that he had come through. And luckily, Mike Young was able to find his way back out of this maze of tunnels, underwater caverns that he had gone through to try to find his buddy. He squeezed back through that super tight passage that he had to get through and actually made it back up through the drain to the top of the blue hole and told all the people of the Foundation that unfortunately Shane Thompson was deceased and that they needed to rescue him. And I believe it took them a little bit to get his body out, but they did manage to retrieve Shane Thompson's body. And after that, they just kind of were like, yeah, this place is super dangerous and you shouldn't let people go down in there. As far as I know, though, guys, they are still trying to explore the vast network of cave systems that are underneath the blue hole in New Mexico. But that's it, guys. That's the story. Absolutely horrifying. I couldn't imagine what it would be like. The last minutes of Shane Thompson's life must have been absolutely terrifying. I have zero intention of ever going underwater cave diving. That does not sound fun to me. But what about you guys? Please leave it in the comment section below. Have you gone cave diving? Do you guys think that it's something you'd be willing to try? I don't know. Have you ever been to the blue hole just up top there? Have you ever swam there? I'd love to hear from you guys. And please smash in that like button. Lets me know you're enjoying the content. I really hope that you have enjoyed this story, as morbid as it is. I know it's kind of hard to like these kind of things, but I hope you enjoyed it. And also, if you've been here this long and you're not a member of the channel, please subscribe, keep coming back, hanging out with me, and click that bell, guys. That way you don't miss out on the next macabre, true stories that King Piggly's bringing to the channel right now. But that's it. King Piggly's out of here, and I will see you guys in the next video.